The massive doors of the Galaxy Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the crystalline halls. Ambassador Zexstar walked slowly into the room, his scaled feet clicking against the polished floor. His 3 hearts were beating fast, and his hands shook slightly as he carried the datapad that contained information no one wanted to hear. The chamber was huge, bigger than most cities. Floating platforms held representatives from 47 different alien species, each one more advanced than the humans of Earth. Some looked like giant insects with glowing eyes. Others were made of pure energy, flickering like flames in glass containers. A few were so strange that Zexstar couldn't even figure out which end was their head. But they all had one thing in common. They all thought they were better than everyone else. Especially the humans. Zexstar had spent 3 full years studying Earth. 3 years watching, learning, and slowly realizing something that made his blood run cold. The humans weren't just another primitive species learning to fly between the stars. They were something much more dangerous than anyone understood. Honored members of the Council, Zexstar began, his voice carrying across the vast space. I come before you today with urgent news about the species called humans. We must not attack them. We must never harm them. Because if we do, they will hunt us until the end of time itself. A sound like angry buzzing filled the chamber. It was laughter, but not the kind humans would recognize. The alien species were mocking him. Chancellor Morquin floated down from her platform. She was from the Hegemony, one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Her people had conquered 100 worlds before humans even discovered fire. She had 6 eyes, each one glowing with a different color, and right now they were all focused on Zexstar with obvious contempt. You want us to fear these humans? She said, making the word sound like something dirty. These creatures who still burn chemicals to fly through space? Who fight with metal bullets instead of energy weapons? Who can't even communicate without making noise with their mouths? More laughter filled the chamber. Zexstar felt his heart sink, but he pressed on. Please, just look at the evidence, he said, activating his datapad. Holographic images appeared in the air above him, showing scenes from human history. Look at their wars. Look at how they fight. The first image showed human soldiers from their Second World War, chasing enemy forces across entire continents. The second showed their hunt for criminals, tracking them for years or even decades until justice was served. The third showed something even more telling, humans who spent their entire lives hunting down war criminals, never giving up even when everyone else had moved on. You see patterns of behavior that go back thousands of their years, Zexstar explained. When humans are wronged, they don't just defend themselves. They don't just fight back. They hunt. They follow their enemies to the ends of their world if they have to. They never give up, never forget, never stop. But the council wasn't listening to his words. They were laughing at the images. Look at those tiny weapons, screeched General Korthik from the warrior caste. His people were 12 feet tall and covered in natural armor. We could crush 10 of them with one hand. Their ships are so slow, added Trademaster Velux. Our cargo vessels move faster than their warships. They have no hive mind, buzzed Queen Silex of the Insect Empire. No coordination. They fight as individuals, which makes them weak. Zexstar tried again. You're missing the point. Yes, they're not as advanced as us. Yes, their technology is primitive. But that's not what makes them dangerous. What makes them dangerous is that they never quit. He activated another hologram. This one showing a human detective who had spent 30 years tracking down a single criminal. This human police officer pursued one man for 3 decades. 3 decades. The criminal moved to different countries, changed his name, started a new life. It didn't matter. The human found him. 30 years is nothing, yawned Chancellor Morquin. We live for thousands of years. 30 years to us is like a few days to them. But don't you see? Zexstar's voice rose with desperation. For a human, 30 years is almost half their entire life. They gave up half their existence to hunt down one enemy. What do you think they would do if an entire alien species attacked them? The chamber fell quiet for a moment. Zexstar thought maybe, just maybe, he had gotten through to them. But then the laughter started again, louder than before. "You've been studying them too long, Zexstar," said Chancellor Morquin. "You've started to think like them. These humans are not a threat. They're barely worth our attention at all." Zexstar pulled up more evidence. Stories of human soldiers who crawled through jungles for months to rescue a single teammate. Tales of families who spent generations hunting down the people who hurt their loved ones. Examples of entire nations that went to war and fought for years over matters of principle. "Look at this," he said, showing a hologram of human soldiers landing on a beach under heavy fire. They knew they would die. Most of them did die. But they kept coming anyway, because they believed it was right. "Stupidity," declared General Korthak. "We would have used orbital bombardment, much more efficient." "That's exactly my point," Zexstar shouted, losing his composure for the first time. "You think like warriors. You think about efficiency and tactics and technology. Humans don't think like that when they're angry. They think about justice, they think about making things right, and they will sacrifice everything to achieve it." He showed them one final image, a human mother who had spent 20 years tracking down the person who had hurt her child. She had learned new languages, moved to different countries, and dedicated her entire life to the hunt. When she finally found her target, she was an old woman, but she had never given up. "This is what humans do when you hurt them," Zexstar said quietly. "They don't forget, they don't move on. They hunt, and they never, ever stop hunting until they find you." But the Council had already made up their minds. To them, humans were just another primitive species that would eventually bow down to superior alien technology. They had energy weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had ships that could travel faster than light. They had technologies that seemed like magic compared to human achievements. What they didn't understand was that none of that mattered to a species that would chase you across the galaxy for justice. Chancellor Morquin raised her hand, and the chamber fell silent. "Ambassador Zexstar," she said in a voice dripping with condescension, "your report has been noted. However, the Council finds no credible threat from the human species. They lack the technology, the coordination, and the strategic thinking necessary to pose any danger to our civilizations." "But," Zexstar started to protest. "The matter is closed," she cut him off. "We suggest you spend less time worrying about primitive species and more time on matters worthy of galactic attention." As the Council members began to disperse, returning to their platforms and preparing to leave, Zexstar stood alone in the center of the great chamber. His datapad slipped from his numb fingers and clattered to the floor. He had tried to warn them. He had shown them the evidence. He had explained what would happen if anyone was foolish enough to attack the humans, but they wouldn't listen. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Zexstar began to wonder if this was how extinction began, not with a bang, but with the sound of laughter echoing through an empty chamber. 3 months had passed since the Galaxy Council dismissed Zexstar's warning. The ambassador had returned to his homeworld, but he couldn't stop thinking about the humans. Every night, he would look up at the stars and wonder when someone would be foolish enough to test them. He didn't have to wait long. Deep in the Outer Rim, the Calaxian Syndicate was having problems. Their massive empire needed resources to keep growing, and they had run out of easy targets. The smaller alien species had either joined protective alliances or hidden their worlds so well that finding them wasn't worth the effort. That's when their scouts reported something interesting. A young species called humans had started building colonies outside their home system. These colonies were small, poorly defended, and sitting on top of some of the richest mineral deposits the Calaxians had ever seen. Commander Vorthak studied the report in his command ship, a vessel so large it had its own weather systems. He was typical of his species, 12 feet tall, covered in biomechanical armor that had been grafted to his bones, and completely convinced that might made right. "These humans," he said to his second-in-command, "how many ships do they have?" "Protecting their colonies?" "Maybe a dozen patrol vessels per settlement," came the reply. "They use primitive chemical rockets and metal projectiles. Our shields can stop their weapons without even powering up fully." Vorthak laughed, a sound like grinding metal. And how many of us do they have records of seeing? None, sir. They don't even know we exist. It was perfect. The Calaxians could swoop in, take what they wanted, and disappear before the humans even knew what hit them. Standard operating procedure called for eliminating witnesses to prevent word from getting back to the Galaxy Council, but that was just a formality. These humans couldn't possibly cause any real trouble. The target they chose was New Geneva, a mining colony that had been established just 2 years earlier. It was home to 50,000 humans who had traveled from Earth to start new lives among the stars. They had families there, children who had never seen their home world, old people who had spent their life savings for a chance at a fresh start. The colonists had built their settlement in a valley, surrounded by mountains rich with rare metals. They had schools, hospitals, parks where children played under an alien sun. They grew their own food, made their own clothes, and had started to think of this distant world as home. None of them knew that death was coming from the stars. The Calaxian fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning, local time. Their ships blotted out the sun as they descended through the atmosphere, massive vessels that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. The colonists looked up in wonder at first, thinking perhaps that Earth had sent them new supplies or more settlers. The wonder turned to terror when the bombardment began. The Calaxians weren't cruel by nature, just efficient. They wanted the minerals, and the easiest way to get them was to clear the area of any complications. The humans had built their colony right on top of the richest deposits, so the colony had to go. The attack lasted less than 4 hours. The Colonial Defense Force, made up of a few dozen volunteers with outdated weapons, fought bravely but uselessly. Their small patrol ships were swatted aside like insects. Their ground-based weapons couldn't even scratch the Calaxian shields, but the humans did something the Calaxians didn't expect. Instead of just trying to fight back, they started recording everything. Dr. Chun, the colony's chief scientist, had been studying the local geology when the attack began. As the bombs fell around her laboratory, she didn't run for shelter. Instead, she grabbed every scanning device she could find and started analyzing the alien ships. Her hands shook as she worked, but her mind stayed focused. She recorded the energy signatures of their weapons. She analyzed the composition of their hull materials. She captured audio samples of their communications. Every piece of data went into the colony's quantum transmitter, a device designed to send research reports back to Earth. "Why are you doing this?" her assistant asked as the building shook around them. "Because someone needs to know who killed us," Dr. Chun replied simply. The Calaxians, watching from their command ships, saw her as just another panicking human. They had no idea she was learning their secrets, identifying their technology, creating a trail that could be followed across the galaxy. In another part of the colony, Engineer Rodriguez was doing something even more important. As the Calaxian soldiers marched through the streets, he was planting tiny tracking devices on their equipment. Devices so small they looked like dust, but each one contained enough quantum entanglement technology to be traced from anywhere in the known universe. The colonists had developed these trackers for mining equipment, to keep from losing expensive machinery in cave-ins. Rodriguez realized they could serve a very different purpose. He didn't survive to see if his plan worked. Few of the colonists did. When the attack was over, New Geneva was gone. 50,000 people had been reduced to scattered atoms. The mountains had been strip-mined down to bedrock. The Calaxians had taken everything valuable and destroyed everything else. Fleet. Commander Vorthak looked down at the barren world with satisfaction. "Efficient work," he told his crew. "No survivors, no evidence, no complications. The humans will never even know we were here." But he was wrong about that last part. Dr. Chun had managed to complete her transmission in the final moments before her laboratory was destroyed. The data burst shot through space faster than light, racing toward Earth with information that would change everything. Back on Earth, the message arrived at the Human Defense Coalition headquarters on a quiet Thursday afternoon. The receiving officer, a young technician named Blake, almost deleted it, thinking it was a software glitch. The transmission was fragmented, filled with static, and came with an automatic distress beacon that meant only one thing: New Geneva was gone. Admiral. Torres was in a budget meeting when Blake burst into the conference room, his face white with shock. "Sir, you need to see this. New Geneva ... They're all dead." The meeting room fell silent. Torres was a veteran of Earth's resource wars, a tough woman who had seen more combat than most soldiers half her age. But nothing had prepared her for this. The fragmented transmission played on the main screen, Dr. Chun's voice, calm despite the explosions in the background, describing the aliens who were killing everyone she had ever cared about. Technical data scrolled past, ship designs, weapon signatures, biological samples, and then, in the final moments before the transmission cut out, came the most important words ever spoken. Energy signature locked. Quantum trackers deployed. Patterns stored in long-term memory. They can't hide from us now. Torres stood quietly for a long moment, processing what she had just heard. 50,000 people, civilians, families, children, wiped out by aliens who probably saw them as nothing more than insects to be stepped on. "Sir?" Blake asked quietly. "What are your orders?" Torres walked to the window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the creatures who had done this were probably celebrating their easy victory. They thought they had attacked helpless prey and gotten away clean. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," Torres said quietly. "Tell them we're at war. We don't know with who yet, but Dr. Chen gave us everything we need to find them." She turned back to her staff, and they saw something in her eyes that made them all step back. It was the look of a predator that had just caught the scent of its prey. "These aliens think they can murder our people and disappear into the darkness," she continued. "They're about to learn the most important lesson in human history. We don't forget, we don't forgive, and we never, ever stop hunting." The hunt was about to begin. 2 years had passed since the first human strike at Kepler Station, and the galaxy was beginning to talk about something that had never happened before. An entire alien empire was slowly falling apart, not because of conquest or disease or natural disaster, but because they were being hunted. The Calaxian Syndicate had become the most feared name in the galaxy, but not for the reasons they wanted. Other species whispered about them in trading posts and diplomatic meetings, warning each other to stay away. Not because the Calaxians were dangerous, but because being near them meant the humans might show up. And when humans showed up, things got very complicated very quickly. Ambassador Zexstar watched the reports from his observation station, feeling no satisfaction in being proven right. He had tried to warn the Galaxy Council, but now it was too late for warnings. The humans had evolved beyond anything he had imagined possible. They had become the galaxy's apex predators. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had taken months of careful planning, years of patient hunting, and a level of determination that other species simply couldn't understand. Fleet. Commander Vorthak stood in what remained of his command center, looking at a star map that told a story of systematic destruction. Red markers showed installations that had been hit by human forces. Yellow markers indicated facilities that had been damaged or abandoned because of human threats. Green markers represented the few remaining safe zones in Calaxian space. The green zones were getting smaller every day. "How many ships did we lose this week?" he asked his aide, though he already knew the answer would be bad news. 17 vessels, sir, but that's not the worst part." Vorthak turned to look at the young officer. "What could be worse than losing 17 ships? They weren't destroyed in battle, sir. The crews abandoned them." This was the part that Vorthak couldn't understand. His people were fighters, warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. They had superior technology, better weapons, stronger armor. By every logical measure, they should have been able to crush the human pursuit fleets easily, but logic wasn't working anymore. The humans had done something that no enemy had ever managed before. They had made the Calaxians afraid. It started small. A refueling station would report strange sensor readings, ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. A patrol vessel would find tracking devices attached to its hull, devices that could have been placed there weeks ago without being Detected. Then came the messages. Every time the humans struck, they left behind the same broadcast. This is for New Geneva. We know who you are. We know where you are. We will never stop hunting you. The message was always in perfect Calaxian, spoken by different human voices. Sometimes it was a young woman. Sometimes an old man. Sometimes it sounded like a child. The humans wanted every Calaxian to understand that this wasn't just a military operation. It was personal for every single human in the galaxy. Captain Rivera had been promoted to admiral and now commanded the entire human pursuit fleet. Her ships had grown in number and capability, but more importantly, they had learned to work together in ways that alien military experts couldn't understand. The key, she explained to her officers during a strategy meeting, is that we don't think like a traditional military force. We think like a pack of hunters. Each ship has its role, but we all work toward the same goal. The ships themselves had evolved too. Human engineers had reverse-engineered so much alien technology that their vessels barely looked human anymore. They were faster, more durable, and equipped with weapons that could punch through Calaxian shields. But the real breakthrough wasn't in technology, it was in strategy. Dr. Martinez, now leading the Psychological Warfare Division, had spent 2 years studying Calaxian behavior patterns. They're a hierarchical species, she explained. Everything depends on the chain of command. If we can make their leaders afraid, fear spreads down through the entire organization. The humans had become experts at psychological warfare. They would attack a Calaxian facility, disable it, and then vanish without taking anything. They weren't interested in conquest or resources. They just wanted the Calaxians to know they could be reached anywhere, anytime. Sometimes they would attack the same target 3 times in a month, each strike coming from a different direction, using different tactics. The message was clear, there was nowhere to hide. The Calaxians tried everything to stop the pursuit fleets. They hired mercenaries, formed alliances with other species, even attempted to negotiate with human diplomatic representatives. Nothing worked. The mercenaries took one look at human determination and found excuses to break their contracts. The alien allies discovered that associating with the Calaxians made them targets too, and the humans refused to negotiate until every single person responsible for New Geneva was brought to justice. We don't want your territory, Admiral Torres had told the Calaxian peace envoys. We don't want your resources, we don't want your technology. We want the people who murdered 50,000 innocent civilians. Give them to us and this ends. Refuse and we'll hunt you to the edge of the universe. The Calaxians couldn't understand this kind of thinking. In their culture, warfare was about gain and loss, victory and defeat. The idea of pursuing justice across multiple star systems, spending enormous resources for no material benefit, made no sense to them, but it made perfect sense to humans. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, now Admiral Hayes and head of Human Intelligence Operations, had developed a network of informants throughout Calaxian space. Some were sympathetic aliens who disapproved of the New Geneva massacre. Others were Calaxians themselves, tired of living in fear and hoping that cooperation might bring peace. The beautiful thing about fear, Hayes explained to her staff, is that it makes people make mistakes. They start second-guessing themselves, jumping at shadows, making decisions based on panic instead of logic. The intelligence network allowed human forces to stay one step ahead of every Calaxian move. When the aliens tried to relocate their leadership, humans were already waiting at the new location. When they attempted to establish secret bases, human scouts found them within weeks. The pursuit fleets had learned to survive in deep space for months at a time, resupplying from captured alien materials or trading with species that had grown to respect human determination. They had become nomads of the galaxy, following their prey wherever it led them. But the most terrifying thing about the human pursuit wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their patience. Other species fought wars that lasted months or years. The humans had been hunting the Calaxians for 2 full years and showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, they were getting more efficient, more coordinated, more deadly. Captain Brooks commanded one of the newer pursuit vessels, A ship called Retribution that had been built specifically for long-term hunting operations. Her crew was typical of the new generation of human space forces, younger officers who had grown up hearing about New Geneva, who saw the pursuit not as duty but as a calling. "My little sister would have been 10 years old now," she told her tactical officer, as they tracked a Calaxian convoy through an asteroid field. She was 5 when they killed her on New Geneva. So no, I don't think 2 years is a long time to hunt these monsters. I think it's just getting started. The convoy they were following included 3 Calaxian warships and a command vessel carrying supplies to a hidden base. The aliens thought they were safe, protected by stealth technology and traveling through an area of space that no human had ever been seen in before. They were wrong. Brooks' ship attacked with surgical precision, disabling the escorts and crippling the command vessel. But instead of destroying the ships, the humans did something that sent a chill through every Calaxian who heard the report. They captured the surviving crew members and released them at the nearest Calaxian outpost with a message. Tell your leaders that nowhere is safe. Tell them that humans have long memories. Tell them that justice is coming. Within hours, the story had spread throughout Calaxian space. The humans weren't just hunting their enemies, they were making sure everyone knew about it. Fleet Commander? Vorthak received the report in what had become his daily briefing on human activities. Each day brought news of more attacks, more losses, more evidence that his empire was slowly being strangled by an enemy that refused to fight fair. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different installations. They want to abandon their posts rather than wait for human attacks." Vorthak felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Not fear of death. He was a warrior, and death in battle was honorable. This was something worse. This was the fear of being hunted by something that would never stop, never tire, never give up until justice was served. For the first time, he began to understand what Ambassador Zextar had tried to warn the galaxy. Council, about 2 years ago, the humans weren't fighting a war. They were conducting an execution. And the Calaxian Syndicate was slowly, inevitably, running out of places to hide. 5 years had passed since New Geneva burned, and the galaxy was about to witness something that had never happened before in recorded history. An entire alien empire, once mighty enough to conquer dozens of worlds, was about to fall to a species they had dismissed as primitive insects. The Calaxian Syndicate's final stronghold was hidden deep in a nebula at the edge of known space. It was a massive fortress built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, protected by the most advanced shields and weapons their dying empire could provide. This was where Fleet Commander Vorthak and the last of the Calaxian leadership had retreated. When it became clear that nowhere else in the galaxy was safe, they thought the swirling gases and electromagnetic storms of the nebula would hide them from human sensors. They thought the radiation would be too dangerous for human ships to navigate. They thought they could wait out the pursuit fleets, maybe even rebuild their empire somewhere far away. They were wrong about everything. Admiral Rivera stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the tactical display that showed the hidden fortress. Her hair was gray now, aged by 5 years of constant hunting, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that had driven her since the first day of the pursuit. 5 years, she said quietly to her first officer. 5 years since. They murdered 50,000 innocent people and thought they could just disappear into the darkness. "Ma'am," the officer replied, "our scouts confirm this is their last major stronghold. Intelligence suggests most of their remaining leadership is inside, including Vorthak himself." Rivera nodded. The human pursuit fleets had systematically dismantled the Calaxian Empire piece by piece. Every base, every outpost, every secret facility had been found and neutralized. The aliens who had once terrorized dozens of worlds now huddled in their final refuge like criminals hiding from justice, which Rivera supposed was exactly what they were. The attack on the fortress began at dawn, ship time. But this wasn't like the surgical strikes of earlier years. This was a full assault, 5 years of human anger and determination finally unleashed. The human fleet that approached the nebula was nothing like the small pursuit vessels that had started the hunt. These were warships built specifically for this moment, incorporating every piece of alien technology that human engineers had reverse-engineered during their long campaign, but more importantly, they were crewed by people who had spent 5 years learning to hate with surgical precision. Captain Brooks, now commanding her third ship after the previous 2 had been destroyed in battle, led the first assault wave. Her crew was typical of the pursuit fleet veterans, harder, more experienced, and absolutely committed to seeing justice done. "Remember," she told her gunners as they entered the nebula, "we're not here to conquer territory or steal resources. We're here to finish what they started 5 years ago. Every shot you fire is for the families who never came home from New Geneva." The Calaxian defenses were everything their scientists had promised. Energy beams powerful enough to crack planets lashed out from the asteroid fortress. Shield generators created barriers that had stopped entire fleets in the past. Automated defense platforms filled space with enough firepower to sterilize a solar system, but the humans had been preparing for this moment for 5 years. They didn't charge straight at the fortress like traditional attackers. Instead, they used the nebula's own storms against the defenders, emerging from electromagnetic clouds like ghosts, striking at weak points, then vanishing again before return fire could reach them. Dr. Kim, now leading the tactical development team from aboard the command ship, watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. "They built their fortress to stop conventional attacks," she explained to the bridge crew. "But we stopped being conventional the day they attacked New Geneva." The human strategy was pure persistence made manifest. Wave after wave of ships struck at the fortress, each attack designed not to break through immediately, but to wear down the defenses bit by bit. When human ships were damaged, they retreated to repair facilities hidden throughout the nebula. When Calaxian weapons overheated, there was no relief. It was the same pattern that had defined the entire 5-year pursuit, just concentrated into a single decisive battle. Inside the fortress, Fleet Commander Vorthek watched his defenses crumble with growing despair. His people were excellent warriors when facing other conventional military forces, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for this kind of relentless, methodical destruction. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the humans have breached the outer shield grid. They're beginning assault operations on sections 7 through 12. Vorthek looked at the battle display and felt a cold certainty settle over him. The human attack wasn't just militarily sound, it was personal. Every move they made, every target they chose, seemed designed to remind the Calaxians that this was about justice, not conquest. "How many of them are there?" he asked. "Our sensors indicate approximately 200 ships, sir." "But they're not fighting like a normal fleet. They're coordinating like some kind of pack predator." That was exactly what they were. 5 years of hunting had turned the human pursuit fleets into something the galaxy had never seen before. Military force motivated not by politics or resources, but by an absolute determination to see justice done. The final assault on the command center came just as Vorthok was preparing to evacuate to an even more hidden location. Human soldiers wearing armor that incorporated technology from a dozen different alien species breached the fortress walls with precision explosives. The Calaxian guards fought bravely, but they were facing humans who had spent 5 years learning to fight aliens in their own environment, using their own weapons, thinking 3 steps ahead of every defensive strategy. Admiral Rivera herself led the final push into the command center. She had insisted on being present for this moment, the culmination of 5 years of pursuit across half the galaxy. When she finally faced Fleet Commander Vorthek in his own command room, both of them understood that this was more than just the end of a military campaign. This was the moment when the galaxy would learn what happened when you hurt humanity. Vorthek was 12 feet tall, covered in biomechanical armor, and armed with weapons that could level city blocks. Rivera was a middle-aged human woman with gray hair and a sidearm that would have been considered primitive by Calaxian standards. But when their eyes met, Vorthek was the one who stepped back. "You're insane," he said, his voice carrying all the fear and confusion of the last 5 years. Your entire species is insane. We destroyed one colony and you've spent 5 years, countless resources, thousands of lives, all for revenge. Rivera's response was calm, steady, and absolutely terrifying in its simplicity. Not revenge, she said. Education. She gestured to the human soldiers surrounding them, each one representing years of dedication to a single cause. We want every species in this galaxy to understand something very important. If you hurt us, we will find you. We will follow you to the edge of the universe if we have to. We don't care how long it takes. We don't care what it costs us. We will never stop. The words were recorded by human battle cameras and broadcast across the galaxy within hours. Every species, every government, every criminal organization heard. The same message that Vorthak heard in his final moments: humanity was not prey. They were predators and they had very long memories. The battle for the fortress ended with complete human victory. The Calaxian Syndicate, once one of the galaxy's most feared empires, ceased to exist. Their leadership was captured and brought to trial for the massacre at New Geneva, in proceedings that were broadcast to every civilized world. But the real change went much deeper than one empire's fall. Within a year of the fortress battle, the Galaxy Council had passed the Treaty of New Geneva, formally recognizing humanity's right to exist and prohibiting any military action against human settlements. But the treaty was just paper. The real protection came from something much more powerful. Fear. Ambassador Zextar, now old and tired but finally vindicated, stood before the same Galaxy Council chamber where he had once tried to warn about human nature. This time everyone was listening. The humans have taught us something we thought we already knew, he said to the assembled representatives. They have reminded us that some species, when threatened, don't just defend themselves. They hunt, and when humans hunt, they never give up. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Trading posts that had once buzzed with talk of conquest and expansion now spoke in hushed tones about the importance of peaceful cooperation. Military leaders who had once planned campaigns against weaker species now studied human tactics, trying to understand how persistence and determination could defeat superior technology. And in the Outer Rim, where New Geneva once stood, humanity built a memorial that could be seen from space. The inscription, written in every major galactic language, carried a simple message that had become humanity's calling card among the stars. They hunted us forever. Just as they warned they would, the galaxy was a more peaceful place now. Not because beings had become more civilized, but because everyone understood that there was one species you never, ever wanted to have hunting you. 6 months after New Geneva burned, the Calaxian Syndicate was having the best year in their empire's history. Their treasure ships were loaded with rare minerals worth more than some entire star systems. Fleet Commander Vorthak had been promoted and given his own sector to rule. The other alien species were impressed by how efficiently the Calaxians had acquired such valuable resources. None of them asked where the resources came from. Vorthak sat in his new command center, a floating palace that drifted between star systems like a metal moon. He was reviewing reports of other potential targets when his communications officer approached with unusual news. Sir, our deep space sensors are picking up some strange readings. Small vessels, unknown design, staying just at the edge of our detection range. Vorthak barely looked up from his reports. Probably just scavengers hoping to pick up our scraps. Ignore them. But the unknown ships weren't scavengers. They were human scouts, and they had been following the Calaxian fleet for 3 months, learning everything they could about their enemy. Back on Earth, the transformation had been incredible. The news of New Geneva had spread across the planet in hours, and the response was unlike anything in human history. Not since the world wars had so many nations united behind a single cause, but this was different. This wasn't about territory, or politics or resources. This was about something deeper, that this was about making sure the galaxy understood that humans were not easy prey. Every major nation had contributed to what became known as the Hunt Fleet. The best engineers worked around the clock, combining human ingenuity with the alien technology recovered from Dr. Chun's scans. The military academies were flooded with volunteers, more than they had seen in 50 years, but the most important work was happening in secret. Laboratories around the world. Dr. Kim led the technology development team, working with fragments of data that Dr. Chun had died to collect. The problem, she explained to her team, is that we're trying to chase something that's faster and stronger than us. So we can't win by being faster or stronger. Then how do we win? Asked her assistant, Dr. Kim smiled grimly. We win by being smarter and by never giving up. The solution came from an unexpected source. A group of marine biologists studying pack hunters like wolves and orcas. They pointed out that successful predators don't always catch their prey on the first try. They follow, they learn, they wait for the right moment. These aliens think like soldiers, explained Dr. Martinez from the behavioral analysis team. They strike hard and fast, then move on to the next target. But we're going to think like hunters. We're going to follow them until we understand everything about them, and then we're going to strike when they least expect it. The first human pursuit ships looked nothing like traditional warships. They were smaller, designed for stealth rather than firepower. Each one carried enough supplies for months of deep space travel, advanced sensor arrays based on alien technology, and crews trained specifically for long-term tracking missions. Captain Rivera commanded the lead pursuit vessel, a ship called Persistence. She was a former submarine commander who understood the patience required for successful hunting. Her crew had spent months learning to work in the silence of deep space, communicating through hand signals to avoid detection. Remember, she told her team as they prepared for their first mission, we're not here to fight, not yet, we're here to learn. Every piece of information we gather brings us closer to justice for New Geneva. The Calaxians had no idea they were being watched. The quantum trackers that Engineer Rodriguez had planted were working perfectly. The tiny devices scattered throughout the Calaxian fleet during the attack sent out signals that human ships could follow across vast distances. It was like having a map that showed exactly where the enemy was at all times, but following them was only the first step. Lieutenant Commander Hayes was the fleet's intelligence specialist, a former detective who had spent years tracking criminals across Earth. Now she was applying those same skills on a galactic scale. Look at their patterns, she explained to Captain Rivera as they watched the Calaxian fleet from a safe distance. They hit isolated targets, take what they want, and move on quickly. They never stay in one place long enough for a counterattack. Smart strategy, Rivera agreed. If you're dealing with normal enemies, Hayes smiled. But we're not normal enemies. Are we? We don't need to counterattack immediately. We can wait, we can learn, we can prepare. For 3 months, the human scouts followed and watched. They recorded everything, how the Calaxian ships moved, how they communicated, how they refueled, how they made decisions. They learned that the aliens were arrogant, used to easy victories against weaker opponents. Most importantly, they learned that the Calaxians had a weakness. The alien ships were powered by massive energy cores that needed to be recharged at special stations scattered throughout their territory. These stations were heavily defended, but they were also predictable. The Calaxians had to visit them regularly, and they always followed the same routes. It's like a giant machine, Dr. Kim explained when the scouts reported back to Earth. Very efficient, very powerful, but also very predictable. They do the same things the same way every time. And predictable enemies, added Admiral Torres, are vulnerable enemies. The decision was made to test their new capabilities, not a full attack, that would come later, but a small strike, just enough to let the Calaxians know they were being hunted. The target was a Calaxian refueling station in the Kepler sector, a massive installation that served dozens of their warships. The station was protected by energy shields and guard ships, technology far superior to anything humans had ever built, but the humans weren't planning to fight fair. Captain Rivera's ship approached the station during a shift change when the guards were distracted. Using stealth technology reverse-engineered from alien designs, they slipped past the outer defenses undetected. The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. The humans didn't try to destroy the entire station. That would have been impossible with their limited firepower. Instead, they targeted specific systems, using precise strikes to cause maximum disruption with minimum resources. They knocked out the communication arrays, making it impossible for the station to call for help. They disabled the refueling systems, stranding several Calaxian ships without power. Most importantly, they planted tracking devices throughout the facility, ensuring they could monitor Calaxian movements even more effectively. But before they left, they did something that confused the aliens completely. Captain Rivera had her communications officer broadcast a message on all Calaxian frequencies. It was simple, spoken in perfect Calaxian language that human linguists had learned from intercepted transmissions. "This is for New Geneva. We know who you are. We know where you are. We will never stop hunting you." The message repeated 3 times, then the human ships vanished into space, leaving behind a crippled station and very confused aliens. Fleet Commander Vorthak received the report while reviewing colonization plans for 3 new systems. At first he thought it was a joke. "Humans?" he laughed. "The primitive species from that mining colony? How could they possibly have followed us here?" But the evidence was undeniable. The attack had been surgical, precise, designed by someone who understood Calaxian technology and tactics. The tracking devices left behind were sophisticated, using quantum encryption. That shouldn't have been possible for such a young species. Most disturbing of all was the message itself. The humans had learned to speak Calaxian, which meant they had been studying their enemy for months. They knew things about the syndicate that even some Calaxians didn't know. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "perhaps we should request additional security for our other installations." Vorthak's first instinct was to dismiss the concern. How much damage could a few primitive ships possibly do? But something about the attack bothered him. The humans hadn't tried to steal anything or capture territory. They had simply wanted to prove that they could reach out and touch the Calaxian fleet whenever they chose. It was the behavior of a predator marking its territory. For the first time since the attack on New Geneva, Vorthak felt a small chill of uncertainty. He pushed the feeling aside and ordered increased patrols around all Calaxian facilities. It was a reasonable precaution, nothing more. He had no way of knowing that human scouts were already watching those increased patrols, learning new patterns, finding new weaknesses. The hunt had begun, and the Calaxians were starting to realize they might be the ones being hunted.